Trinbago Knight Riders, battling it out with the Barbados Royals. The tension is palpable, every run matters, and then poof, 3 stadium floodlights just go dark right in the middle of the Knight Riders innings. I mean, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh man, I can only imagine complete confusion, maybe even a few groans echoing around the stadium. I mean, this is a huge game. You don't expect the lights to just go out like that.
You're telling me, and I bet a lot of people there immediately thought, oh, typical GPL, but hold on, because this deep dive, so it takes us down a very interesting path. We've got 3 sources to try and piece this whole thing together, and trust me, some of this stuff is unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think what's so fascinating about this whole thing is that we're not just talking about a simple technical fault, right? We're diving into public perception, the power of assumptions. It's really intriguing.
Okay, so source number 1, the official statement from the Ministry of Culture, Youth, and Sport and GPL themselves. Now, you'd think they'd be scrambling to explain themselves, right? Mm-hmm. But their statement, it almost sounds like they're playing defense. It's a bit strange.
It really is, isn't it? I mean, they go out of their way to stress that all the CPL matches at the stadium were independently powered, not running off the GPL grid at all.
Yeah, and not only that, they basically said they were just on standby to help if needed. Almost like, don't even look at us.
It makes you wonder what was going on behind the scenes. Was there immediate pressure to deflect blame? Especially when you consider that our second source mentions that President Ali himself was actually at the game.
Oh man, talk about adding fuel to the fire. Can you imagine the scramble to get those lights back on with the president watching?
Mm-hmm.
But this second source also drops another detail that really got me thinking. The stadium itself, it was built back in 2007 for the Cricket World Cup. Could aging infrastructure have played a role here?
It's definitely something to consider. And that's where source 3 comes in and throws us a real curveball. This is a press release from McCorp, and get this, they were the ones providing the backup power to the stadium. And not just any backup either. We're talking a state-of-the-art Cat XQC M1600 module. This thing is supposed to be top of the line, capable of switching on instantly if there was a problem.
And they weren't shy about it either. They were bragging about their sound-attenuated design and dual frequency, all this fancy tech jargon. They even said they worked directly with the organizers to make sure power wouldn't be an issue. So what went wrong? It's like buying a fancy sports car.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the one that promises incredible speed and handling, and then it just stalls out of the traffic light. You'd be questioning everything, right?
Absolutely. And that's where the real intrigue of this whole thing lies. I mean, McCorp was so confident in their system, and it was sophisticated by all accounts. So the question is, why didn't it kick in seamlessly as advertised?
Right. Like, was there a miscommunication? Did someone forget to plug something in?
Yeah.
I mean, what are the chances of having a power blip with both GPL and this super duper backup system ready to go?
Well, and this is where we have to read between the lines a bit, because neither GPL nor McCorp come right out and say, we messed up. But that contrast between McCorp's pregame confidence and the reality of the outage, well, it speaks volumes.
Yeah, you're right. They were practically bragging about their system beforehand. So to me, this points to a potential breakdown in communication or coordination, maybe, between the stadium management, GPL, and McCorp. It seems like everyone was so focused on their own piece of the puzzle that they didn't make sure all the pieces fit together.
Precisely.
Welcome to another edition of Voice of the Diaspora. Blackout at the Guyana National Stadium last night in the middle of an internationally televised cricket game between Guyana and Trinidad. Maintenance problem. The Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport under Charles Ramson, Minister Charles Ramson Jr., there seems to be a lot of problems existing over time in terms of maintenance, in terms of managing things professionally. Today in studio with me is a very, very popular guest. He is a political activist and he's also a talk show host. Every day you can see him in the morning talking to Guyanese and across the diaspora, where those who are tuning in would get daily happenings of what, transpires in Guyana. And so I want to welcome my guests almost immediately. We will be talking about the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport. Should the Minister of Culture resign? Should he be forced to resign now? when we look at the incompetence of the minister, his racial bias and his arrogance, is it time for Guyanese to rise up and force the PPP government for the minister to ensure that the minister steps down? We know the situation with sculptor and the administrator of the Barrow School of Art, Mr. Ivor Tom. We know what transpired, and you know, and these things are very embarrassing. Now, an international game at our national stadium, and because of maintenance problems, of course, we have heard and we have read and we have seen that Makurp and GPL, they've distanced themselves. They were like, Shaggy, it wasn't me. And so I think we have all come to the realization that this has to do with the lack of maintenance, and that it comes under the purview of the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport, and of which Charles Ramson is the head. And so I want to bring my guest in right away. Kidackie Amsterdam is no stranger to any of us. In fact, the PPP is after him. They have arrested him recently. They've locked him up. They're persecuting him. He continues the fight. He continues the struggle. He's here as a special guest on Voice of the Diaspora to talk about these two particular issues and more. Kidackie Amsterdam, welcome to Voice of the Diaspora.
Thank you, Norman, and thank you, viewers, for having me. Good
Well,
afternoon. Good.
I deeply appreciate the fact that you took time out to join this program, because I know you're excessively busy. You have your morning shows, you got so much to do, you have to take so many calls and all that kinds of stuff. You're always on the ball, and the fact that you have taken that opportunity, you have taken that time, sorry, to come on this program, regardless of your busy schedule, we have to recognize that and appreciate that. Kidackie Amsterdam, welcome once again to Voice of the Diaspora. Let's talk. Look, we are going to talk about sculptor Ivor Tom and what transpired, but the burning issue at the moment, I wish for us to start with. Kidackie, what is happening in Guyana? The National Stadium last night, an internationally televised cricket game in oil-rich Guyana, and blackout for 2 hours. We know that GPL has distanced itself. It said it's not the provider of power at those games, including this one. And McCarp said that the issue has been one that has to do with technical problems coming from, problems that has nothing to do with them. And so I want to ask you your view, and talk to us extensively on your view of what transpired at that cricket game last night.
Well, I'll tell you, Norman. As you spoke there, what came to my mind is I don't know if we call it a fable, but many of us would have read the book The Emperor's New Clothes. The Emperor's New Clothes, the story of the Emperor, a tailor outsmarting the Emperor basically to say, well, look, I'm making you a new suit, and anybody who can't see it, they're simply stupid. Let me just put it down to that. We have a situation like that in this country. What happened last night was bound to happen at some point in time. And a lot of people are saying it's an embarrassment. By now, I don't know if that is an embarrassment for the PPP. Maybe it's an embarrassment for the citizens of this country. Because here, let me tell you this. We have seen electricity shut down at the international airport, Cherry Dragon International Airport. Um, International flights utilize that facility. Many flights have had to turn back to divert to go to Trinidad or somewhere close by until they fix the electricity. So what happened at the stadium was bound to happen at some point in time. What it has done, in my mind, though, is because cricket is a big thing. Internationally, cricket is a big thing. The CPL is a big thing. People from all corners of the world would have been tuned in to that match because it was a big match. It's an important match. So what it is that incident last night actually did for us is show the world what Guyanese endure on a daily basis. Show the world what Guyanese endure on a daily basis. Also, put on show the incompetence of an autocratic, a dictatorial, a callous, um, an
Racist.
unaccountable government. Racist. We can form all use all of the adjectives to describe the PPP. But certainly, it has put them on show for the world to see that when Guyanese and when folks like you and I, when social media influencers, as they call us, when we say that we are in the midst of a dictatorship, we're in the midst of an autocratic government, we're in the midst of a government that is incompetent and poorly manages our resources. I think the world has had a first-hand look last night at that. Was it a case of pure incompetence? You said earlier a lack of maintenance. I have my doubts. I'll tell you, I have my doubts. Um, Listen, across the world, sports, especially sports like CPL cricket, um, has been under the microscope when it comes to match fixing and corruption.
Wow, wow.
And I'm saying, or I'm asking myself, if an international investigation should not be launched as to what transpired last night at the stadium. Good. I usually ask who the beneficial owners of certain things. Priya Manichan the other day said if it wasn't for Jagdeo building a stadium, what Guyanese would have done or what people would have done. Um, I want to ask who are the beneficial owners of the Amazon Warriors. How does screw up like last night benefit the Amazon Warriors, benefit the beneficial owners of the Amazon Warriors? I'll tell you this. We as Guyanese, we usually rally around our national teams, whether it's football, cricket, boxing, whatever, athletics, whatever. But the Guyana Amazon Warriors is not a national team. It's a franchise. It's owned by private individuals. And so one has to really and truly ask the hard questions. Many people are not going to ask the hard questions. Many people are not going to be happy that I'm saying, listen, maybe we should investigate whether match fixing took place last night by the quote unquote blackout.
What do you
Right?
mean by match fixing? Explain a bit.
Okay, is it that the power disruption was orchestrated
Wow,
to
wow.
create a particular situation which would influence the outcome of the match? Is it possible that it was so? Um, who are the technical people that were able to isolate and find just, I would say, on the nick of the time of the Duckworth Lewis system coming into play, that it was a cable that was underground cable that was damaged? One would assume that an underground cable being damaged might take more time than it took um, to find and resolve the situation,
2 hours.
right? The systems are usually run, from my understanding, or they're supposed to be checked, from my understanding, prior to games.
Yes.
All of the games that were played at the stadium, are we saying that there has been no indication whatsoever that something was faulty? Those are some of the questions I want to ask.
I want to I get what you say there, and it's interesting. Yeah, it's an angle. You know, sabotage in my term. could have been at play there. But there's a history of incompetence coming from the culture ministry under the leadership of Charles Ramson Jr. It is not the first time we have experienced embarrassment at the international level. When it, in relation to the stadium, we know that at one time there was, no proper toilet facilities. There were flushing buckets placed there for people to use, and patrons complained. Among other things, I know we have the situation with the lights. My question here is: do you believe that the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport should be forced to resign because of this international embarrassment that transpired last night before the eyes of the world?
Norman, there has been many, many, many international embarrassments. I will repeat that.
Right.
Um, and we haven't seen any ministers of the government made to resign as a result of those embarrassments. Um, if there's anything Ramson should be made to resign for, I don't think necessarily it has to be the stadium. What happened last night? I am saying, and I'm repeating again, perhaps there needs to be an international investigation as to what transpired at the stadium last night. But Jagbia is talking about commissions of inquiries and so on. I think the ICC, if these games are governed by the ICC, needs to cause to happen an international investigation as to what transpired last night. Having said that, there are many, many, many other embarrassments and failings caused by Charles Ramson Jr.
Yeah.
should require him to resign. The most recent is the manner in which he treated Ivor Tom.
And we will get to that. And we will talk about that. And that's an aspect of the program. But let's stay on this embarrassing situation for a moment before we go to the Ivor Tom situation. Um, so you are saying, well, you haven't said that he should be made to resign on this basis in relation to the cricket, because there are other things that
There are other possible
were
elements
more,
which
that were more serious than this. I think all of the situations are serious, and it puts Guyana in a bad light. An oil-rich country, a country that is supposed to be one of the fastest growing economy in the world. Guyanese are proud people, and though we do not have our fingers on the economic strings to ensure that our pride is maintained, that is completely controlled in a dictatorial way by the PPP regime, though we don't have it. We feel the pangs and pains of those embarrassments deep in our soul. Maintenance problem. We know the GPL distance itself. GPL is under the radar for blackouts, frequent blackouts, almost not even frequent, daily blackouts across Guyana for years and years and years, and it continues. Macorp is claiming that they're not responsible. Their power generating system is great and is powerful. This has to do with maintenance problem. You are saying that maybe it's more than that. It's match fixing. Elaborate, please, because I want to think that the incompetence of the minister and his ministry has been glaring before the eyes of people in society, and this is
I,
another cock up. But
I'm saying this, Norman. It might be an escape from jail card
okay,
to simply be able to blame the minister and say it is incompetence on the part of the minister that resulted in last night's quote unquote embarrassment. Okay? My position is we ought not to be as simplistic as we are in saying that it is the minister's incompetence that resulted in what happened last night. Because, like I'm saying, there are varying elements involved in CPL, varying elements involved in the operation of the stadium, varying elements involved in the embarrassment last night, as we call it. Until such time that a proper investigation is conducted, we cannot say for sure that this was the result. This was the result of the minister's incompetence. This was the result of poor maintenance practices. Okay? Um, MAPOP say, hey, it's not us. GPL say, hey, it's not us. Right? Is the minister responsible for the maintenance of the electricity supply system at the stadium? Who are
He's
the technical?
responsible for the general maintenance. He
Yes,
oversees
the
that.
buck
But
stops. The
I
buck
don't want
stops.
to cut you. I don't want to cut you. But let us go we heard from a very highly reputable journalist in Guyana, Gordon Mosley of News Source, who has 276 plus thousand followers on his social media platform. He's respected by Guyanese at every level in terms of dissemination of news and so on. And he had this to say in relation to the incompetence of the relevant ministry. He said, but it wasn't the first time at the rodeo for embarrassing situations at this stadium during CPL matchups. Let's not forget the electronic board arriving after the tournament began in Guyana 2 years back. And then there were the washroom facilities with the well positioned flush buckets that fans complained about. There's a clear issue of maintenance, and the sport ministry, which manages the stadium, must take the blame for the issues. Do you disagree, Kidackie Amsterdam, with the view of Gordon Mosley?
Norman, I am saying again, I will repeat as all people say for the umpteenth time. There is there's no question about the competence of the minister. There's no question about the competence of the minister. But I am saying that given the high stakes involved in CPL cricket and CPL cricket at this stage, it is simplistic to simply say that last night's power failure was as a result of the minister's incompetence or the ministry's failure to do maintenance. I am saying we can only arrive at a definitive conclusion if a proper investigation is
Yes,
done.
so you're calling for an investigation.
Yes.
And
Let
that
there be an investigation.
investigation may prove that it wasn't maintenance problem, it was match fixing.
It may very well prove that it is maintenance problem. But if it proves that it is maintenance problem, it also clears the local cricket officials and team owners and all of that of involvement in match fixing. Because one of the allegations being made currently is that there's a possibility of match fixing. And this is not an allegation that is now made only now. It has been made several times prior. Several times prior. Look, well-known West Indian player on his Instagram um, post described it as a word that I wouldn't even use on your program, right?
You're allowed, you're allowed. Look, I want to continue with what Gordon said. And reputable journalist, Gordon Mosley, and he said even now as the tournament is in high gear, you have some private companies after paying millions for their private booths complaining quietly as they are forced to bring in their own portable air conditioning and cooling units. And the maintenance issue for the sport and culture ministry is not limited to Providence. Last year, we had international football matches moved from Guyana to Barbados over the poor quality of field football pitch at the track and field center on the west side. And then there is the National Cultural Center, where instead of redoing the peeling paint work to the front, two larger than life banners were unfurled from the top to the bottom to hide that. And those banners remain in place. So there is a clear case based on observation by a highly reputable journalist and others that points to the incompetence of the sports ministry and its minister. And there's a consistency there. I am not going to dismiss your view that it's match fixing, but I just wanted our viewers to hear another position in terms of the bad management of the Ministry of Culture in terms of these facilities, the mismanagement and the lack of maintenance. There's a situation where many believe, Kidackie, that that friends, family, and cronies get these contracts to fix things that experts should fix, and ministers and government officials are getting cutbacks, and they don't care about whether we are embarrassed on the international stage. They don't care about that, but the consideration of match fixing is a thought, and there will be no forthcoming investigation into that. So I think that's a pipe dream. If anyone is asking, I want to ask you once again if you believe that the government should now decide that Charles Ramson is a liability to the government and to the people of Guyana, and that they should ensure that he resigns. And further, I want to ask you if you believe that the political parties, the AFC, the PNC, the WPA, of which you are a part, that have released statements condemning what transpired, that they should go a bit more to take action, whether it's protests or not, to pressure this government into ensuring that Mr. Ramson resigns. Over to you.
I am repeating again. There is no question about Charles Ramson's Jr. incompetence. There have been several instances where his incompetence has been on show. Most recently, is mishandling of that situation involving Ivor Tom. Previously, there was the situation of him saying that African Guyanese have no role models. Those are all reasons for which Ramson should have been made to resign. But looking at the PPP, I have not seen, with all of the failings of the ministers, all of the failings of many of their officers, I have not seen them cause or force any of them to resign. Should Charles Ramson resign for his failings? Yes. Should the government ask him to demit office for his failings? Yes. Will they do it? No. Should the opposition up the ante to get him to resign? Yes. Will it work? I will sit here and say, looking at the behavior of the PPP, it's highly unlikely that they will respond to the opposition's efforts and have Ramson removed.
What efforts are you talking about? Because there's a
I
history
am
in
talking,
Guyana. There's a history in Guyana where the PPP understands one language, and that is a language of massive protest action, street demonstrations, and that forces them to the table, and it makes them acquiesce, and it makes them conform. There is no other method in the history of our country that we have seen that have caused the PPP to act, in a way that benefits all. And so, as a political activist, as a representative of the WPA, as a fighter, as a freedom fighter, of which you are, I want you to elaborate a bit more on the opposition's responsibility to act, and where they're lacking in action to ensure in an oil-rich economy where the wealth is being siphoned off, where corruption is out of control, where the PPP is allowed to govern and mismanage this nation while they steal money, while they take the nation's wealth for themselves, while they ignore holding their representatives who have erred responsible, while they're allowed to run scot free, that an opposition can release press statements, and the PPP, they do not care about that. So they continue along their trajectory, whether it's Ivor Tom, whether it's the stadium, which is an international embarrassment, whether it is Barjack Dio's corrupt practices involving Sue that the U.S. Journalists expose. The opposition seems not to be able, and I'm not talking about the PNC only, I'm talking about the WPA, the smaller parties, the AFC, all of them. They seem not to be able to take serious action to ensure that people in Guyana get the justice they need.
Norman, I am convinced that in any functional democracy, in the instances of Ramson's quote unquote misbehavior, Ramson's failings, a letter from the opposition benches would have caused the government to act. Representation in the National Assembly by the shadow minister for culture would have caused the government to act. I am positive, I am aware that those methods have been tried, but they have not succeeded. Because what we are dealing with is an autocracy. What we are dealing with
Yes.
is a dictatorship. And as long as the minister, quote unquote, is doing the biddings of his handlers, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. You're asking about protest? There are varying forms of protest. Are we saying that we should fill the streets of Georgetown to protest blackout at the National Stadium when a CPL game was being played to have that minister removed? There are more, in my mind, important matters which we ought to protest for. A clean voters list at GCOM. Up until now, we have not been able to, for varying reasons, fill the streets of Georgetown with citizens to demand a clean voters list and biometrics.
Are you saying that the opposition, including the WPA, the AFC, the PNC, and the smaller parties, are you saying that they're failing the Guyanese people in this regard?
No, I'm not saying the opposition is failing the Guyanese people, whether a smaller party or a larger party. I am saying that the responses that are, I would say, desired from the citizens of this country in general, has not been forthcoming. Let me say, for example, I started several years ago a protest in front of GCOM for a clean voters list. You mentioned I'm a member of the WPA. That makes me a member of the opposition.
Yes.
That protest continues up until now, but the numbers have not grown over the years. I have sat right where I am for several years educating, highlighting on my daily program. Dr. Hines has done the same thing. Guyanese have not responded, at least not as yet, to all of the shortcomings of the government, which we place before them on a daily basis. Every day I say, listen, if you are ready to protest, I'm ready. If you are ready to protest, I'm ready. Yes, we've had utterances from, for example, the leader of the opposition who says, well, this is not the time to protest. this is not a right time for street protest. But if this thing affects the people, ultimately, it is the people who have to take a stand. Ultimately,
There's a culture of the police killing Guyanese and persecuting them and so on. The culture in Guyana, the political culture has always been in relation to protests. That the involvement of the PNC, especially, which is the major party in the opposition, and other parties making that call, people feel a sense of protection. They feel a sense of support, and they feel that they are identifying with a political struggle. To ask the people to go out there when the leader of the opposition will say, well, it's not my angle at the moment to engage in street protests. And people go out there and engage in massive street protests. It seems to me, you're the guest in the program, so you can voice your view. But it seems to me that it's putting the cart before the horse, and it's simplistic and dangerous to throw our people, the Guyanese people, out there who have to vote for the opposition, who will go in their form of protest to ink their fingers for a party or parties or coalition that they believe would have done justice by them, that they believe would have pushed back hegemony, that they believe would have, been qualified to govern based on their representation in opposition. I don't think we are seeing that. And I honestly believe, and this is my opinion, that it's unfair to say that the people must go out there for some reason, diplomatic or otherwise, in which the opposition wants to remain clear and clean that they're not involved in a struggle. They're not
no,
involved
you
in
have to
struggle.
be. Let me interrupt here. You have to be, as I would say, specific when you talk about the opposition. I've just said to you as a member of the Working People's Alliance, and I dare say as a leading member of the Working People's Alliance, I've called our people to protest GPA. The responses have not been great.
But you've also said, Kidackie, without interrupting you, you've also said that there wasn't any major turnout, there wasn't any impact. I am saying that the opposition's responsibility is to force each other to come together. It's to literally say that WPA is not the opposition alone. PNC is not the opposition alone. AFC is not the opposition alone. We are seen as the opposition. And therefore, we have to put our house together, act together, to ensure that we join in one accord to present a face as an opposition, combined or otherwise, that will confront dictatorship and hegemony in Guyana. That is what I'm saying. I can't agree, Mr. Amsterdam, with all due respect. You're a powerful political activist. You are doing what you ought to do. You're doing more than a lot in the opposition. But I can't agree with a piecemeal approach in which we are saying that one person out of one party is trying, but the entire party is not coming out, and the entire opposition is not holding heads to ensure that there is one mandate in terms of confronting a dictatorship, an a government that is raping the nation, that is murdering people, that is fulfilled with mismanagement and corruption and racism. I can't understand if in an oil-rich economy where billions of dollars exist, that in this day and age, an opposition figure can say, well, I am trying. But I can't say otherwise. That is exactly what you are saying. I am asking you now whether there will be that call from the opposition in general, through protest action or another stern way of saying we demand results. We demand Ramson goes because Ramson is the culture minister of Guyana, not of the PPP. He is a government minister that represents all of Guyana. They talk about one Guyana. They are failing miserable in that mantra. I am saying that an opposition is there to ensure that it holds a government accountable and that it must unite to hold that government accountable. Your final view on that, and we are going to go straight into the situation with the administrator of the Borough School of Art and what transpired in relation to Charles Ramson's arrogance and racist attitude towards that entire situation.
I can say to you that a demand ought to be made. I can say to you that the opposition should be making that demand. I can't say to you whether it will be made. I can't say to you whether it will be made as a joint opposition position or individual political parties in the opposition will make individual demands for Ramson to go. I can also say to you that for quite a while, the Working People's Alliance, to which I'm a member, has been calling for a joint opposition front to
Yes.
confront this government.
Agreed.
Good. And so, yes, I endorse joint action on the part of the opposition, not only in this recent embarrassing situation, but on the matter of a clean voters list, on the matter of the mishandling of the economy, on the matter of the misbehavior of the government. I am saying, and I've said it and I will continue to say it, that a joint opposition approach would be ideal. It has not happened as yet. There's some who say it will happen. I pray for the day it happens because I think it is long overdue.
But I think that the people should force the opposition in that regard instead of going out in the street before
Because normally you're
the
coming right back
protest.
to where I am.
Yeah,
Because
you understand.
I've
Go
said
ahead.
to you, I've said to you, the people must recognize their responsibility and the people must take a stand.
But then
And
you
if
said
you are
that in regard to protesting and going out
yes,
there. I am saying the people should take a stand against the opposition to force them to lead the charge.
well, I am, listen, let me be clear here. The people should take a stand. The
Yes.
people should take a stand to ensure they get the kind of actions that they see as being beneficial to them. Okay? And if it means you have to protest the opposition to get the opposition to lead protest, that is what you have to do. If it means you have to go there and start the protest and demand that the opposition, quote unquote, leaders join the protest, that is what you have to do. But at the end of the day, it has to be the people involved in whatever actions to be taken
Taken. Yeah.
are not sitting back
Agreed.
and saying, well, if the opposition ain't doing it, we ain't gonna say nothing. We ain't gonna do nothing.
Thank you. I just want to add this point before we go to the next topic, and I just want to say that Barjagdio has been very skillful in how he deals with these emerging patterns of incompetence coming from the PPP. And in a show of unity with those incompetents in his party, he hasn't asked any of them to apologize. He hasn't, you know, dismiss anyone or whatever. He adds a piecemeal approach to saying, you know what, I will appease this situation by ensuring someone gets back, someone gets their job back, and other stuff. And that is unacceptable. It is unacceptable. It shows the hegemonic nature of the People's Progressive Party. We will go to the next topic, which has to do with the administrator of the Borough School of Art, Ian Ivor Tom, who is a renowned a renowned sculptor in Guyana. We will talk about that. But before we go there, let us take a short break.
All right, so picture this. You're at the CPL Eliminator match in Guyana Trinbago Knight Riders, battling it out with the Barbados Royals. The tension is palpable, every run matters, and then poof, 3 stadium floodlights just go dark right in the middle of the Knight Riders innings. I mean, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh man, I can only imagine complete confusion, maybe even a few groans echoing around the stadium. I mean, this is a huge game. You don't expect the lights to just go out like that.
You're telling me, and I bet a lot of people there immediately thought, oh, typical GPL, but hold on, because this deep dive, so it takes us down a very interesting path. We've got 3 sources to try and piece this whole thing together, and trust me, some of this stuff is unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think what's so fascinating about this whole thing is that we're not just talking about a simple technical fault, right? We're diving into public perception, the power of assumptions. It's really intriguing.
Okay, so source number 1, the official statement from the Ministry of Culture, Youth, and Sport and GPL themselves. Now, you'd think they'd be scrambling to explain themselves, right? Mm-hmm. But their statement, it almost sounds like they're playing defense. It's a bit strange.
It really is, isn't it? I mean, they go out of their way to stress that all the CPL matches at the stadium were independently powered, not running off the GPL grid at all.
Yeah, and not only that, they basically said they were just on standby to help if needed, almost like, don't even look at us.
It makes you wonder what was going on behind the scenes. Was there immediate pressure to deflect blame? Especially when you consider that our second source mentions that President Ali himself was actually at the game.
Oh, man. Talk about adding fuel to the fire. Can you imagine the scramble to get those lights back on with the president watching?
Mm-hmm.
But the second source also drops another detail that really got me thinking. The stadium itself, it was built back in 2007 for the Cricket World Cup. Could aging infrastructure have played a role here?
It's definitely something to consider, and that's where Source 3 comes in and throws us a real curveball. This is a press release from MyCorp, and get this, they were the ones providing the backup power to the stadium. And not just any backup either. We're talking a state-of-the-art Cat XQC M1600 module. This thing is supposed to be top of the line, capable of switching on instantly if there was a problem.
And they weren't shy about it either. They were bragging about their sound-attenuated design and dual frequency, all this fancy tech jargon. They even said they worked directly with the organizers to make sure power wouldn't be an issue. So what went wrong? Just like buying a fancy sports car.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the one that promises incredible speed.
Welcome back to Voice of the Diaspora. Political activist and popular talk show host here in studio with me, Mr. Kidackie Amsterdam. He's no stranger to the Guyanese people. He's a freedom fighter, very powerful, very consistent. Kidackie Amsterdam is talking to us about the CPL game last night that was embarrassingly interrupted by Blackout at the Guyana National Stadium, and we will be talking about sculptor and administrator of the Burroughs School of Art, Mr. Ivor Tom, and he will give his view or his views on that situation before we wrap up. And so back to Kidackie. Kidackie Amsterdam, welcome back. We know in September, sometime in September, perhaps around the 18th or 19th, I don't have the information, and that a very, very prominent Guyanese, African Guyanese, Mr. Ian Ivor Tom, who is a sculptor responsible for sculpting the 1834 Damon Monument. The 1834 Damon Monument, I think it's placed there in honor Regina, if I'm correct. Mr. Tom is a distinguished African Guyanese. That sculpture would have been done in 1988, while Mr. Charles Ramson, who is the culture minister, was a primary school child. And we saw recently in September that while at work, the administrator of the Burroughs School of Art, Mr. Tom, would have received racial abuse from 2 Indo-Guyanese who wanted to park illegally in the compound of the Burroughs School of Art. He explained to them that was not allowed, and they racially abused him. Got on the phone, they called the Minister of Culture. The Minister of Culture immediately called Mr. Tom and said, report to my ministry. Report to my ministry. Mr. Tom got there and had to wait for more than an hour like a child sitting there. And then when he met with Mr. Ramson, he received, the worst form of disrespect the worst form of disrespect as an iconic African Guyanese. He was actually told indirectly that you are not qualified to speak to Indo-Guyanese, whether they are janitors or whatever. You are not qualified to speak to Indo-Guyanese in that manner. And I am not concerned with any racial abuse because he did not deal with the racial abuse. And he reprimanded Mr. Jack Dio, who is the vice president and general secretary of the PP at this press conference, said that what happened to Mr. Tom was wrong, and the permanent secretaries, the police, and the commission of whatever, racial equality commission or whatever you call it, it doesn't exist in my mind. It's a PPP stooge organization, so I don't even remember what it's called. He said they should deal with that. And he said he scolded Mr. Ramson. But there was no apology forthcoming. There was no sacking for the gravity of the situation. It seems as though African Guyanese are not treated as equals in our multicultural society, regardless of our status. Kidackie, let us talk about what happened, and I want you to explain, in your own words, to our viewers, this entire situation with Mr. Ian Ivor Tom, the administrator of the Borough School of Art and a renowned sculptor in Guyana.
You know, Norman, when I read of that situation, my first response was, you notice this, you might notice this afternoon, I'm responding to a lot of things in song. The first thing that came to mind was take warning. You better take warning.
You better
Right?
do
Why?
good.
Why am I saying that? What happened to Ivor Tom is what has been happening to African Guyanese all the years of the PPP in government, and it is what will continue to happen to African Guyanese so long as the PPP is in government and African Guyanese, especially those that consider themselves middle class and comfortable and of repute, internationally acclaimed perhaps, continue to behave the way they behave. It's not an excuse for Charles Ramson's mistreatment of Mr. Tom, but I am of the firm opinion that many of our African brothers and sisters who are in a position that can take a stand that will influence the international community and force the PPP to change its attitudes to African Guyanese are failing to do that and settling for sitting at the PPP table in exchange for crumbs. And at some point in time, like we have seen with Mr. Tom, those decisions come back to haunt them. Let me give you a little history. You said Mr. Tom was responsible for the 1834 monument. Mr. Tom was responsible for the design and I think construction of the 1823 monument, which is on KTC1. Now there's an organization of
Wow.
Guyanese known as the 1823 movement. That organization, at least up to 2013, I am sure long before 2013, but 2013, Donald Ramon was in government. And the PPP was talking about construction of the monument, and that organization was insistent that the rightful place for the monument is parade ground, because that is where our ancestors were beheaded, etc., etc. Instead of joining that fight, instead of supporting that fight with the 1823 movement, Ivor Tom accepted the job from the PPP to design and construct the 1823 monument on the KTC1. There was no support for a wider African Guyanese call for the monument to be placed where we believe it ought to be placed.
Are you
Ivor
saying that
Tom
Mr.
and
Tom pandered to the PPP in that regard? Is that what you're saying?
exactly, that's what I'm saying. He pondered. As a matter of fact, if you were to check the Kaicho news, at the time the Kaicho news will tell you that he was US based, right? The newspaper referred to him as US based sculptor. I don't know what transpired, but he became the director of the Borough School of Art. I am sure he's eminently qualified for that job. But the question is, was he granted the job out of respect for his qualification? Or was he granted the job out of reward for his siding with the
With the
PPP
PPP.
to disrespect African Guyanese? Right? And so one has to ask, and Mr. Thomas has to ask himself, if he opened himself to the disrespect from Charles Ramson, right? I just want to put that out there because I want to refer to African guy.
This is new to me. Go ahead. This is new to
I
me.
want to put, for example, African Guyanese like Henry Green, former commissioner of police, Clifton Hickins, former, well, not former, current acting commissioner of police, Sam Hines, Mark Phillips. All of those I consider token African Guyanese who have allowed themselves to be used by the PPP to further oppress African Guyanese.
And you're
By
putting
simply,
Ivor Tom in that category.
yes,
Go ahead.
by
Go ahead.
simply being at the table to allow the PPP to say, we are not as racist as people are claiming. Look, we have African Guyanese in prominent positions. Because having African Guyanese in prominent positions doesn't necessarily mean that those African Guyanese are respected for what they are. And case in point, Ivor Tom recently being abused and attacked based on his race. I don't know if it is an Indo-Guyanese that did it. I don't know what the ethnicity of a guy of the person that did it.
Two Indo-Guyanese, a male and a female.
Good. What I was about to say, up until now, the media has not had the gall, the gumption to report that the two persons who attacked Mr. Tom racially are Jennifer Khan or Roxanne Gildari. No, we don't do that in this country. We don't do that in this country. Up until now, the ERC has not stepped forward to say, well, these are the people who treated Mr. Tom badly, and so we will hold them to account. The Minister, Charles Ramson, has not done that. As a matter of fact, Charles Ramson poured, as they say, coals on the head of Mr. Tom by saying to him, you are not the face, or you don't represent the face of
The Borough School of Art, what it should be.
or the face that I would like
Yeah.
for this particular institution. Okay, you know what it is to me, what is for the insult to injury? The fact that Mr. Tom resigned and allowed himself to be called by the vice president, as they say, to convince him that he ought to withdraw his resignation
And he went back to
and,
work.
return to work. Because hear me, the situation that resulted in his resignation has not been addressed. It
There
has
hasn't
not
even
been
been an apology.
exactly. It has not been addressed. And so again, Mr. Tom allowed and continues to allow the PPP to disrespect him and by extension disrespect African Guyanese. Because when you're most learned, when you're most respected, are disrespected by extension, the people are disrespected. And the time has come, the time has long come for African Guyanese to stand up, especially again, I'm saying, if they have clout, to stand up and point out what is wrong with this PPP government even alongside us lesser minions, let me call it that. And until the ivory thumbs of this society are prepared to do that, I am saying again, there are many, 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 many more such incidents to take place. And African Guyanese will be continuously disrespected because the people we expect to stand firm and demand respect are not doing that. In many instances, I want to believe some of our people are simply transactional in their attitude. As long as I get a bread, I good. As long as I could sit at the table and get some crumbs, I good. As long as I get a contract of employment, I good. Forget the insult, forget the disrespect. As long as I get to stay at the table, I good. I have no apologies for my sentiments.
Kidackie, I want to say this. Westmus Roberts in the comment section is saying, "Now I see the light, Mr. Amsterdam." And Bantu King, Mr. Amsterdam, you're absolutely correct. I had an inkling of suspicion that something was wrong. And I hope Mr. Tom is watching, because I felt that there was a paucity of his presence on social media platforms like ours to give his view of what transpired.
Let me
Mr.
say this to
Jag,
you,
yeah,
Lawrence.
go ahead, go ahead.
Up until the students wrote the Kaicho news to highlight this issue, we didn't know that it existed.
Yeah,
The
and it's
first comment I heard from Mr. Tom on this issue or read is after the students wrote Kaicho news complaining that they have lost the services of Mr. Tom because of this incident. Go ahead, sir.
Kodaki, you have added a perspective that I was suspicious existed. I'm glad that you confirmed that. This is Kidackie Amsterdam, a political activist, a very, very strong political activist, and of course, host of Cam's TV and Buxton Morning Show. In his closing remarks, he will tell you what time he's on and so on. But I am happy that you added this perspective, because I wanted to reach out to Mr. Tom very early, when this situation happened. And I was wrestling with myself to understand why, Mr. Tom wasn't speaking out on certain platforms that stands up for platforms that stand up, sorry, for African Guyanese and for people who are oppressed by the PPP. I'm glad and I'm happy that you've lent your position on this issue. You've clarified certain things to me. However, if Mr. Tom is watching, he's welcome to come on this program to give his view of what transpired. And the fact that Mr. Tom, heeded to Mr. Jagdio's advice that he should return to work and everything went quiet is a matter of concern for me, and should be a matter of concern for African Guyanese in the struggle against a regime that continues to oppress African Guyanese and use them as window dressing simultaneously to prove to the world that they are not racist. Kidackie Amsterdam, it's a revelation that I've learned from, and I'm not surprised because I know that you're a straight shooter. Um, before we go to your closing remarks, I want you to sum up, in your view, the GPL situation, the National Stadium situation, and Mr. Tom's situation, and give an overview of what you expect generally to happen in the coming days.
What do I expect to happen in the coming days? Um, well, sometimes I really operate outside of the box, as they say. Um, Straight off the top of my head, I don't expect a thing to happen. I don't expect the Minister of Culture to be asked resign because or to resign because the Minister of Culture is caught up in both of these situations. Ivor Tom's the disrespect of Ivor Tom and the embarrassment at the stadium. Both of them fall squarely as we see the box stops with the Minister of Culture. Um, and I'm talking again based on experience, based in history. The disrespect to the African Guyanese people when he said we had no role model. He wasn't made to resign then. And so I don't expect that he's going to resign now. I expect people to continue to call for his resignation. I expect people to continue to point out the weaknesses of this government, the autocratic nature, the dictatorial nature of the government. I
But the
expect
government is allowed to do what they're doing within
all
a
of that to
national
continue.
context. They're allowed to do what they're doing in a national context because the opposition seems not able, they seem unwilling or unable to confront this government and demand that respect be given to every Guyanese. It is something that bothers me, and have said to my viewers on my platform that it is not in the best interest of the opposition to come down strong on them after the PNC would have had their internal elections for leadership, and that we are facing a 2025 elections in which the PPP has to be removed. And I have hold back a bit, but the reality exists for our people that we are seeing the emergence of these atrocities, for the want of a better term. We are seeing the emergence of these atrocities after atrocities, and a statement comes out, but nothing else happens. So the PPP is emboldened. To continue along that trajectory, unchecked, unchecked. You have political activists like yourself, myself, Rickford Burke, Mark Benshaw, others. You have journalists who are very unbiased, like Gordon Mosley, that can come out and speak to these issues in an objective way to say that this is unacceptable. This is incompetence. This is mismanagement. This is, whatever. And all we can hear from our opposition that is expecting Guyanese across the board to come out and vote for them at the 2025 elections. All we can hear from them is empty rhetoric, empty rhetoric. In Parliament and outside of Parliament, they are sounding their voices with no backup action as the PPP run amok. Kidackie Amsterdam, I have been educated on this program by your deliberations and your revelations, and I am honored to have this moment with you. Your closing remarks, sir. But before you go to your closing remarks, give us an update on your arrest and where it is at the moment, whether you're in court, the case continues, or so on, and then give us your closing remarks.
Well, you're sending me to check here. That case continues certainly. I have two court dates back to back, as we will see. I think it is in November, November 9th and 10th, perhaps. Let me check. I'll tell you the exact date. But that case is November 6th and 7th, right? November 6th and 7th at 10 a.m. in Court 3. That is really matter continues. I understand that because statements have been submitted and so on, there are supposedly 7 witnesses who will testify in the
And
trial.
for the sake of our viewers, why were you arrested?
Well, I don't know. I was arrested on the pretext of the police having a warrant for my arrest in relation to cybercrime. Cybercrime, the claim is that I don't know, encouraged, facilitated, allowed somebody, or I even endorse somebody calling for the heads of several leading members of the government of Ghana. That was the claim. The video evidence is out there to show clearly that when the caller call and made a comment, I specifically said I do not endorse the violence. I do not support the violence. I, however, agree that there are many people in the society who the country could do better with seeing their backs. Um, I said both people in the government and in the opposition, the country can benefit from seeing their backs. I'm trying to paraphrase here. They're not the exact words, but in short, I said I do not endorse the violence. While I agree that some people need to go
Yes.
and let the country breathe. And so I was arrested and charged for that. The
And
courts
you're
will
still
determine.
in court. You're still in court. Kidackie Amsterdam, in your wrapping up statement, tell us what time your show is on daily and give your closing remarks.
Well, the show is on usually Mondays to Fridays from 6 to 9. Between the hours of 6 and 7:30, they're about to be replay segment of the previous day's program. And then I present my.
If our viewers want to connect to it, is it Buxton morning? What is Cam Stevie?
No,
What is it?
it is Guyanese morning time or
Guyanese morning
Buxtonian
time
morning
or
time,
Buxtonian
right?
morning time
And you can find us on CAMS, that is KAMS TV, both on Facebook and YouTube.
on YouTube. Your closing
Yes.
remarks, and then we call it an evening.
Well, my closing remarks is listen, we are at a critical juncture. I pray for the day that the elements of the opposition will see the importance of coalescing quickly, coming together quickly, and fashioning a forward moving plan to remove the PPP from government electorally. There are many issues which I think we have to have resolved before E-Day, and the faster the opposition elements come together, the faster they can be tackled. Citizens must recognize that they have an integral role to play in the removal of any government through elections. And so I want to encourage the citizens to ensure you do what you have to do. Get registered. Ensure that your registration is up to date. Ensure that you are at your correct addresses. Ensure that those youngsters who have attained the age to be registered, I think they have to be 14 by December 14 or something like that, ensure that they get onto the electoral roll. Sit at your tables and have discourses about what this government is doing and the impact on the citizens as a whole and the impact on African Guyanese in particular. And formulate a plan as to what the family can do to get the PPP out of government and give the country space to breathe and grow.
Kidackie Amsterdam here on Voice of the Diaspora. I want to thank you very much for being here, and I want to urge you to continue your struggle for the liberation of African Guyanese. You're one of the foremost political activists in Guyana and talk show host on the ground in Guyana that is fighting the struggle. I want to ask my viewers to support your program as we trod along the road of this unity trust in every aspect, whether it's a social media platform, talk show hosts, or opposition politicians. Unity is very important. You have been very clear on this program in your views, and I think our viewers have received you well. Thank you, Kidackie Amsterdam, and do have a great night.
Thank you for having me
I
and
want
have a
to
rest.
thank I want to thank my viewers also for joining this program. I ask you to share this program. We have a problem where the program is not circulated properly because people are not sharing it, and I don't beg people to share it or so on. But the struggle is intense at the moment, and we ask our people to ensure that our platforms become relevant as it can be, and that we put our shoulders together to ensure that the significance of what we're doing is spread across the country and across the diaspora for all to hear our side of the story. The struggle continues. the struggle continues. There will be haters, but I love my platformers. I love my platformers, and there are so many of you. Thank those of you. I want to thank those of you who would have wished me a happy birthday. I was overwhelmed by the thousands and thousands of birthday wishes. I know that I'm hated by many, and I'm controversial. But you keep me going. You keep me going. And you keep this platform going. We are voices in this moment in time. In this moment in time. And I love you unconditionally. You have the latitude and the space to criticize, to hold me accountable, but you will remain here because that is what democracy is. That is what democracy is. But do not let the haters give you a narrative that they cannot prove about fighters in the struggle, whether Burke, Ben Shop, Kidackie, Norman Brown, Melly Mel, or Dr. David Hines, Paul Slow, and others. Do not let them give you a narrative that dispels us in this struggle. I want to thank my viewers for joining this program. Continue to share it even today, tomorrow, and the days ahead. I say this to my haters. I say this to my haters. I look good. And no matter the hardships in life, I am here with health and strength and daily bread to continue this fight and this struggle. So I say to you, let them keep talking. Together we aspire. Together we achieve. The PPP, the dictatorship, the hegemony, the racist political organization must be removed in 2025. I extend respect to the opposition, whether it's the AFC, the PNC, the WPA, or the smaller parties. But I'm saying to you that let us talk, and let us not go at each other's throats. But let us talk. Let us resolve to talk and reach out to each other, because you are erring too. You are erring too. And I don't want the dirty linen to be washed at this critical juncture. So let us talk. Our people want that. Our people want this unity. And so we must respect our people, and we must acquiesce to their requests and demands. It is the people that are most important, not us. And so until then, let the haters keep talking. We continue in this struggle.
Keep talking. Oh Lord. Oh yes, Master. Hear my voice, oh God, in my prayer. Preserve my life from fear of the enemies. Hide me from the secret counsel of the wicked, who will Lord, from insurrection of workers of iniquity. Let them talk, keep them talking. We're gonna keep them talking, talking, they're talking. We've got a lot more coming, talking, they're talking. Oh yes, I know. We're gonna keep them talking, talking, they're talking. We've got a lot more coming. Let them say what they wanna say. What they do or say can lead I astray. No, 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 no. Jah is I guide day by day. Oh, we Lord, and He's my help in every way. That's why I'm singing, talking them talking. We're gonna keep them talking, talking they're talking. We've got a lot more coming, talking them talking. Oh yes, I know. just like an old chap. Jah is gonna put them to part. Let them talk, keep them talking. We're gonna keep them talking, talking, they're talking. We've got a lot more coming, talking, them talking. Oh yes, I know. We're gonna keep them talking, talking, they're talking. Yes. We've got a lot more coming. Yeah. Bubble me a bubble now.
All right, so picture this. You're at the CPL Eliminator match in Guyana, Trinbago Knight Riders, battling it out with the Barbados Royals. The tension is palpable, every run matters, and then poof, 3 stadium floodlights just go dark right in the middle of the Knight Riders innings. I mean, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh man, I can only imagine complete confusion, maybe even a few groans echoing around the stadium. I mean, this is a huge game. You don't expect the lights to just go out like that.
You're telling me, and I bet a lot of people there immediately thought, oh, typical GPL, but hold on, because this deep dive, so it takes us down a very interesting path. We've got 3 sources to try and piece this whole thing together, and trust me, some of this stuff is unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think what's so fascinating about this whole thing is that we're not just talking about a simple technical fault, right? We're diving into public perception, the power of assumptions. It's really intriguing.
Okay, so source number 1, the official statement from the Ministry of Culture, Youth, and Sport and GPL themselves. Now, you'd think they'd be scrambling to explain themselves, right? Mm-hmm. But their statement, it almost sounds like they're playing defense. It's a bit strange.
It really is, isn't it? I mean, they go out of their way to stress that all the CPL matches at the stadium were independently powered, not running off the GPL grid at all.
Yeah, and not only that, they basically said they were just on standby to help if needed, almost like, don't even look at us.
It makes you wonder what was going on behind the scenes. Was there immediate pressure to deflect blame? Especially when you consider that our second source mentions that President Ali himself was actually at the game.
Oh, man. Talk about adding fuel to the fire. Can you imagine the scramble to get those lights back on with the president watching?
Mm-hmm.
But this second source also drops another detail that really got me thinking. The stadium itself, it was built back in 2007 for the Cricket World Cup. Could aging infrastructure have played a role here?
It's definitely something to consider. And that's where Source 3 comes in and throws us a real curveball. This is a press release from MyCorp. And get this, they were the ones providing the backup power to the stadium. And not just any backup either. We're talking a state-of-the-art Cat XQC M1600 module. This thing is supposed to be top of the line, capable of switching on instantly if there was a problem.
And they weren't shy about it either. They were bragging about their sound-attenuated design and dual frequency, all this fancy tech jargon. They even said they worked directly with the organizers to make sure power wouldn't be an issue. So what went wrong? It's like buying a fancy sports car.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the one that promises incredible speed and handling, and then it just stalls out of the traffic light. You're questioning everything, right?
Absolutely. And that's where the real intrigue of this whole thing lies. I mean, MyCorp was so confident in their system, and it was sophisticated by all accounts. So the question is, why didn't it kick in seamlessly as advertised?
Right. Like, was there a miscommunication? Did someone forget to plug something in?
Yeah.
I mean, what are the chances of having a power blip with both GPL and this super duper backup system ready to go?
Well, and this is where we have to read between the lines a bit, because neither GPL nor MyCorp are going to come right out and say, we messed up. But that contrast between MyCorp's pregame confidence and the reality of the outage, well, it speaks volumes.
Yeah, you're right. They were practically bragging about their system beforehand. So to me, this points to a potential breakdown in communication or coordination maybe between the stadium management GPL and MyCorp. It seems like everyone was so focused on their own piece of the puzzle